It was so clear this morning. My mind and my heart had never felt more convinced. There is only God, a great, wild God. Then somehow I got yanked from that annihilating realization, and now can appear again as this wine-stained talking rag. That's from Hafiz, 14th century Persian poet. I love poetry. Many of you know I'm the music director, and after all, songs are just poems put to music. And I want to thank Medora and the team for allowing me to give this talk today, for inviting me. I've been a Unity student for over 20 years, and I've only been invited to do the talk one other time, which was on the Beatles' Let It Be. So, little coincidence there. That's serendipity is God in action, right? So I got a lot out of Roger Houston's book. I have several of his books. This one is Dropping the Struggle, and this is the 5th week of our book study program, so next week will be the last one. What I wanted to do was recap everything that's kind of gone before, and then talk about this week's topic, which is change. And then at the end, I want to share with you a little bit about the creative process of writing that theme song that Heather sang. So in the introduction to his book, Houston reminds us life is full of challenges and conflicts. If we can accept this and allow it to be, each moment holds the opportunity to respond more creatively and intelligently than the last moment. Sounds good to me, huh? I want to be able to do that. So how do we do this? By finding and feeling the space between our often fear-based thoughts and resting there. In other words, using our spiritual tools. He goes on to point out the ways we struggle, and he offers alternative ways of being, and he uses poetry to enhance his ideas. The first is the struggle to be special. Are we really so different from each other that we feel more deserving than anyone else? The memorable quote for me from this chapter was by Thomas Jefferson. He said, "Remember that no one is better than you, but that you are better than no one." And some people even make themselves feel special because of their suffering. The way out of both of these is to be willing to watch our thoughts and our egos at work. Second, none of us will have a perfect life. But if we can accept that we don't have control and that life is always right, we can come home to who we really are. He suggests that we take a breath. And he doesn't use the word meditation, but he says, take a breath and open to what is unfolding. The meaning and purpose of our life is to be that unique individual that we are, the best that we can, in this place and time, to accept whatever comes our way. Krishnamurti, a 20th century Indian spiritual philosopher, said it this way: "This is my secret. I don't mind what is." And when we can't quite accomplish this, we can at least be kind to ourselves. Then we come to love, which is first and foremost an inside job. We have to love ourselves. This poem by Derek Walcott at the beginning of the chapter is worth reading again. "The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, 'Sit here, eat, sit, feast on your life. When it comes to loving others, we can move from the talk in our heads to the spacious intelligence in our hearts and soften to the love that is always present. Struggling with time is a problem for us when our thoughts get lost in the past or in the future. The solution is to acknowledge the stillness at our core that is always present. Now is a good time to breathe. And listen to some more poetry. This is from the Sonnets of Orpheus by the 19th century Austrian poet Rainer Maria Rilke. My parents gave me my middle name after him. Be in this immensity of night the magic force at your senses' crossroads, the purpose of their mysterious plan. And though you fade from earthly sight, declare to the silent earth, I flow. To the rushing water say, I am. Now we come to the chapter on change. As Heather said, change is the one thing we can absolutely count on. So why are we afraid of it? Well, we've spent our whole lives creating the story of who we are, and our identity counts on it. Our ego clings to it. Why should we want to change that? Well, we often misuse the power of our minds and create unhappiness by resisting what is. One of the co-founders of Unity, Charles Fillmore, never one to mince words, put it in strong terms in his book, The Revealing Word. He said, the greatest disintegrating element in human consciousness is resistance. Thoughts build or destroy, and they will work in your mind and body in adverse ways and tear down the good you desire if you do not form them with care. So forming our thoughts with care is very important. We can see the world around us, that things don't stay the same. We see change in nature, in science, in technology, and in our families. We watch our bodies change and know the inevitable outcome. So how do we face each day without fear or anxiety that the house of cards might fall at any moment? This is where our spiritual practices come in the form of faith. Houston talks about this in terms of allowing and accepting and aligning ourselves with change. As he stated in the 3rd chapter, your life, however it shows up, whatever is happening, is your unique purpose. Sometimes remembering how good we have it will get us centered and jumpstart us back to a place of gratitude. It might be enough for you to count your blessings and say, I have a roof over my head. I have friends, family, my health, etc. We can embrace change when we see the truth that is unfolding is happening exactly the way it's supposed to. As the author says, it is true, necessary, inevitable, and ultimately, therefore, good. But man, it's hard to embrace change when it's painful, isn't it? But what's the alternative? To claw and scratch and weep and wail at what is? Here the author says, trust the inscrutable intelligence of life that is living us as it is showing up for us in this very moment. If it is sorrow, let us make friends with sorrow. Let us not drown, but swim in the waves of sorrow. I want to share with you a story about some big changes that happened in my life. This was 1998, 20 years ago. And from the outside, it may have looked like I had the perfect life. I had a good job teaching elementary school here in Novato. I had a good man as my husband. And I had a son who, in spite of being a terrible teen, I adored. And I had a wonderful community in the Lighthouse Singers. They supported me socially, spiritually, and creatively. My life looked pretty good. But I was holding a lot inside and juggling all these balls and taking care of others more than myself. So call it a midlife crisis, if you will, but I began suffering from major depressive disorder. There had been some history in my family of depression, but I was not prepared to fall apart the way I did. I had been teaching for 7 years. Then I changed schools, and none of the techniques I had learned were working anymore. I felt completely out of control, and I had to quit my job. I could no longer stay in my marriage, which felt inauthentic, so I left my family to move in with a friend. And the Lighthouse Singers was no longer sustaining me in the way it had before. All the balls I had been juggling were lying on the ground in front of me, and I had to decide which ones I could pick up. At this point, I could only surrender to life, to let go and let God, and give up what was no longer real. After several antidepressants, I found one that worked. I would not give up my family, so I found a way to see my son every day by driving him to school. I maintained a friendship with my ex-husband, and eventually I found a job which fulfilled me more than I could have imagined at Bread and Roses. Around this same time, I joined Unity and became very involved with the teachings and with the music, and this became my community. I discovered my right place in life by not resisting changes that occurred, and by having faith, and by loving myself. I want to read to you a poem by Mary Oliver called The Journey, which was a really important poem at this point in my life and still has relevance to a lot of us. I see a lot of heads nodding. The Journey. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. Little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds. And there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. Houston says, life does what it does without concern for your preferences. I wanted to just add that after this time, day by day, I would put one foot in front of the other, and I allowed change to unfold in my life and accepted what was happening. I think that from going through that experience and seeing how much better my life is on the other side, I don't fear change. So, why not align ourselves with the truth by taking it a step further? Here's another quote by Rilke. Want the change. Be inspired by the flame where everything shines as it disappears. He's telling us to embrace whatever it is that life is giving us. Houston says, if it's a divorce, let it be. If it's the loss of a job, let it be. And if we are dying, may it be so. And this brings me to the theme song that I wrote. That phrase, may it be so, it's for me, it's an affirmation. It's not like you're groveling to God and saying, please let this happen. You're saying, may it be so. It's a strong, positive statement. It's like saying amen, which the literal translation is, so it is. Amen. May it be so. When I write a song for the fall program, I read the book through and I take notes and I arrange them and I make it into a poem and then I add music. This song that I wrote takes Houston's ideas and culls them down to what I look at as his process and his results. It's kind of like the Reader's Digest and then some. Cliff notes. More, cull down more and more and more. So the song says, I float on the ocean of possibility, buoyed by faith and poetry. So we're not going to sink, we're going to float. There's a lot of reference to the ocean and to water in this book that you may have come across. I circled all of them. And what is it that buoys us? Our faith, our spiritual preference, and our poetry, or whatever it is that supports you. Maybe it's music, maybe it's the arts, maybe it's your meditation practice, whatever it is, it helps you to float above. And then what happens? The song says, I quiet, I soften, which is really important for me, and I open and I breathe. May it be so. And it is. Then the second verse says, aware in the space where thoughts come apart, I sense the mind that lives in the heart. Did you know that there are actually brain cells in your heart? Your heart is a thinking as well as a feeling thing. And to find that space where there are no thoughts and slip into your heart, you come to the place where it says, I'm knowing, I know, I'm loving, I'm accepting and allowing, and I breathe. May it be so. I am fully present to what's unfolding now, resting, alert, filled with grace. I let go of resistance and let God life flow, and all is divine in this place. So for that part of the song, I think about being in the present and watching what is unfolding, resting in it, being aware of it, and filled with grace, which is given to us from God. What we do, what we can do, and the divine meets us right where we are. Then we let go of the resistance and let God life flow through us and be us, and then all is divine in this place. The last verse says, here in this moment, there's only what is, and no separation exists. There's no separation between you and me, between us and God. I am grateful. I'm living, I'm alive. I am present and I breathe. The breath can bring us back to that center. May it be so. Can you say that one time with me as an affirmation? May it be so. I want to leave you with one more poem. This is also by Rumi. Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open to the study and begin reading. Take down a musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. So I hope for you that you find your special way to kneel and kiss the ground. Let's say together our denial and our affirmation. The denial. I do not let negative thoughts about change separate me from the truth. And the affirmation, I am fully present to the good which is unfolding now. May it be so. May it be so.